Hello. So I'm really excited to have you, Meera and Danica, here today to talk about your book, A Better World is Possible. And when your publicist, Tracy, reached out to me about it, just the title alone made me excited to talk to you because we've discussed over email a little bit, there are so many of us who are feeling a lot of feelings about what's going on in the world right now. I am an optimist and I do believe a better world is possible. And I know your book is focusing on one aspect of that, but we can go in any direction in our conversation about it today. But the very first thing that I would love for you guys to do is just tell me what the book is, what it's about, and then we can go into a little bit more about who you each are as authors and illustrators.
Yeah, Danica, you should kick it off.
Okay, so yeah, the subtitle is Global Youth Confront the Climate Crisis, which tells you a lot about what the book is about. It features four youth climate activists who are real people. It's a nonfiction book, and it kind of tells their stories of how they got involved in climate action and how they came together to help organize the 2019 climate strike in New York City that was part of the biggest climate protest. It was the biggest climate protest in history all over the world. And these four youths are very inspiring. So we told their stories, and then kind of in between their stories of how they got to be these amazing climate activists, we kind of dropped in pieces of background about what climate change is and how it works and what are the political influences and what is climate justice and what is climate grief and what are all the different factors that kind of go into having a very good basic understanding of climate change.
So how is it that the two of you work together on the book? How did you start working together and what was sort of the division of labor?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of happenstance that we came together. We knew each other we both lived in Brooklyn at one point, so we ran in the same circles, and we were at a mutual friend's book event. And Danica, you were already working on the book, right? And struggling a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, I had sold the book concept to First Second, and I was trying to write it myself and really struggling a little bit with research aspects and also my own anxiety and climate grief as I learned more about climate change. And so I was having a hard time putting the book together narratively. And it wasn't entirely happenstance because I was kind of putting out feelers in all directions to people I knew. And I was like, do you know anyone who could help me just like have a conversation? Or, I was calling people I knew who were involved in climate work or in publishing to be like, how do I tackle this? Like, how do I structure this book? And a mutual friend put Meera and I in touch. So we had, I had reached out to her before, but then
And I totally ignored you, like when you first. This is where in person is so much more valuable than emails.
so we ran into
Yeah.
each other at a friend's book release event in Brooklyn. And Meera said, "Hey, are you still working on that graphic novel?" And I was like, "I'm trying to, but I could really use a collaborator." We started talking. And at that point, Meera, I think you had finished your book project, your previous book, and you had a little bit more space in your brain and in time. So we started working on it together at that point.
Yeah, and I was teaching at that point that year, and I think also, like, I was just getting more jazzed about, like, the whole idea of reaching new audiences and younger audiences, and also just doing something totally different because I'm usually, like, a long-form science journalist, long, complicated sentences and complicated science and stuff like that, and it was also kind of, like, enticing, like, "Oh, this will be fun." I also thought it would take us, like, a year or something. I don't know what I was thinking.
Right? It always feels like it should take a fraction of the time.
Okay, so you guys said so many things that I want to tackle. As you know, our audience is mainly author illustrators who are interested in kids' graphic novels. And so I like to get into like the nitty gritty of the publishing behind the scenes, whatever you're open to talk about. So one of the things you said, Danica, is I sold the book to First Second, and it was just you initially, and then you ended up realizing that you wanted a collaborator. So can you share more about like how you broached that? Like what were you thinking initially? Did you have an idea like I want to bring somebody on board with a separate contract? Like I don't know what you're willing to share about the paperwork and legal stuff, but That'd be really cool to hear.
Right. Yeah. It was a little tricky because normally when you work on a book, you know what you're doing in advance. And I thought I knew what I was doing. I sold the book on a proposal and I had, illustration samples and I had an outline and I knew that I wanted it to feature youth climate activists. But at that point, I was coming more from a fiction point of view or background. And I don't have a very strong background in journalism or in science research. So when I started to really try to put the book together with the outline that I had, I realized like, oh, this is feeling kind of dry. Like I really want it to be, you know, like Elizabeth Colbert is one of my favorite
Mhm,
science writers, and it's always because she puts these amazing, interesting human stories together
mhm.
with science to draw you in. So I wanted it to be like that, but I was just struggling to figure out how to do that and who to feature in the book. And in 2019, I went to the climate strike in New York, and so I was talking to Meera about that, and she had the great idea to feature the youth activists that were involved in that climate strike, me as like a character at the beginning, like going to this strike and starting to learn about climate change and climate activism. And Mira, really found the four people that we wanted to feature. And we did the interviews together, although Mira kind of took the lead on that, having background in interviewing people. So it just was such a great collaboration because it was exactly what I needed to get the book off the ground. And then I had to go to my agent in the first second and be like, "Hey, we need to add Mirror to this. Like, I need this to get this book done." So it worked out.
Yeah.
You wanna add anything, Mira?
No, just that it's been I mean, journalism is usually really solitary. I mean, you have an editor, like, that's kind of like the best relationship, and I have the great privilege of working with a bunch of really awesome editors, but that just kind of happens in at certain stages, and a lot of the time, like, the reporting is really fun when you're out in the world talking to people and talking to strangers, but most of the writing process is just, you're just
Mhm,
kinda by yourself, muddling through stuff, so I think it was just really great, like, even though I took the lead on writing, like, what was essentially like a manuscript, like a screenplay, Danica did chunks of it, we were back and forth constantly when I was getting too in the weeds and too, like, insider language, Danica was great about, like, "Nope, this is, like I don't get what you're talking about here," and I would help bring it back in for because we were kinda going through Danica, like, your own journey of learning about what was going on, and so it worked narratively really nicely that there was, like, this learning process happening for Danica and me trying to figure out how to, like, take these complex ideas and synthesize them into these distilled haiku
mhm.
formats, that are really clear and can be portrayed, which that part was a whole magic that Danica did in terms of visualizing it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm good at is taking complex information and making it visual and making it kind of simplified.
Mhm,
But I needed the basic I needed the information to begin with. So
mhm,
that so Mira did a beautiful job at writing the script. And then I could go in and be like, okay, we need to make this a little bit more, simple
mhm,
or like, understandable for like a 14-year-old or,
mhm.
it was a good fit for our two skill sets.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Mira, I think that, "Oh, I thought it would take a year." So can you tell me the whole timeline? Like, Danica, from the moment that you had the idea, like, how did the idea initially come to you? And how long did it take to get something together that you pitched to the publisher? And then how long were you working on it before Mira came on board? And then how long was it that you and Mira together worked on it?
Let's see if I can remember. Well, I know that I started thinking about it in the early 2017 because I was artist residency at a forest in Kentucky. So I was in a cabin by myself for a couple months in the winter, and I was feeling very connected to the landscape and to nature, and feeling like I had written a graphic essay on ecotourism and was trying to figure out what to do with that. And so the project started out completely different. It was like I'm going to make curate a book of all these different artists and writers doing graphic essays on ecology or on climate change or on people's connection to nature. But that didn't go anywhere in terms of publishers. And so then I thought, well, if I do maybe I can write the whole book because they wanted it to be more cohesive. They didn't want a bunch of styles within the same books. then I started thinking about making an entire book about climate change on my own. So yeah, 2017 was when I started thinking about it and trying to write up a proposal. Then I think I worked on that for a couple of years. I think it was 2019 or 20 when I maybe it was must have been 2019 or
Must have been
18.
2019 because you brought me in on 2020, and so you already had it at that
Okay,
point.
yeah. So it was 2018 or 2019 when I took it out to publishers and First Second picked it up. And then 2020 was when because it was right before COVID started that Mira and I met at the last book of
Mhm,
for the yeah, before COVID,
mhm.
and we worked on it for several years.
Yeah, I think it probably took me maybe a year and a half or something like that to really get I mean, I almost wanna say 2 years of, like, us, like, buttoning up the manuscript because obviously Danica didn't wanna pick up her
Mhm.
watercolor brush until, like, everything was really in place, and we had to go through legal because we were doing a nonfiction book about real people, and so that hung it up for a while, but it was probably 2 years before we really had the whole manuscript just, like, done, and then you did pencils, right? Like, the whole layout of pencils.
And then it took me a couple years to draw it because it's a 200-page, nonfiction graphic novel with all these characters. Yeah, the legal team took forever. The legal team, I feel like we were waiting on them for almost a year just because
Yeah.
I couldn't start drawing until we had the legal team's approval.
Wow. Yeah, anytime permissions and real people are involved, oh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there was, like, times where I'm like, "Oh, I'm such an idiot. Why did I approach this like a journalist? We coulda just made composite people," but, like, looking back now, Danica, I wonder how you feel, but, like, I am so glad that these are real kid like,
I
they're
think it's much more powerful.
yeah, yeah, it's not made up. It's, like, it's real, and it's, like, the interludes are fact check, like, everything is just feels really solid to me, like, as a journalist coming at this, thinking about that.
Danica, did you hand paint it?
I did a combination of digital and watercolor. So I drew the line work digitally and then I watercolored it by hand and layered that. And then I added a little bit more digital color.
Wow, that's such a fascinating process. Did you, I mean, I know some artists who do hand paint their comics, which is a lot. I mean, were you happy with the process that you ultimately ended up with, or were there moments where you're like, "Oh god, why did I do it this way?"
Yeah, no, I was happy with it because the digital line work saved me a lot of time from doing pencil sketches and then inking, which I had done on all my previous projects. So it did save me a lot of time doing that step digitally. Uh, you just can't get the same quality of color with a digital color as you can get with watercolor. So I knew that I wanted to have real watercolor in it. That's kind of like I've made almost all my projects that way with
Mhm.
watercolor on paper. So I knew I wanted to do it by hand, at least the element of it. But then I added some digital color, like I did the skin tones digitally, just because there's all these characters and they need to be consistent throughout. So it was a little easier to have like a palette of skin tones to match the right person.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any videos of you, like, of you, actually drawing and painting?
I don't think I made any while I was working on it, but I've made a couple just like to show, the process.
Are there any that are publicly available?
There's like a
Yeah,
little
on
social
our
media
social media, yeah.
of it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, we'll
We
mention
can
to
send you
people if
that
they should
link.
go look at your like, on Instagram or
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, very cool. So, okay, circling back to the actual kids or young adults that you interviewed, how did you find them?
Yeah, this is where I just, like, put on my journalist hat, like, luckily, the event was on YouTube recorded, like, it wasn't a great recording, but I was able to, like, just watch that whole thing and take notes of every single speaker they were introducing, and then also just looking through there was a lot of news and media coverage of that event, and this was when, like, Greta Thunberg had sailed across the Atlantic, like, there was just a tremendous amount of energy, so there was a lot of coverage, so I also was looking through all of those to see who was being quoted, and just because there's so many people who are part of organizing it that are not necessarily on stage, and that's a key part of the story, and so, yeah, I forget I feel like we had a list and reached out to, I don't know, 6 or 10 people or something like that. We had a handful of conversations. We talked to a filmmaker who was covering some of the strikes. And we were just kind of sending out feelers in all these different directions and saying, like, we're working on this YA graphic novel. Like, would you want to be a part of it? Just to find out who had the bandwidth, who had time, who had interest. Yeah. And we were all looking also just for interesting stories in terms of geographically where they were coming from. This whole fundamental question of like what made a 15-year-old kid be up on stage talking to 250,000 people. Like, what events led this like young person to have this focus? And so trying to find diversity within their stories of what led them into work and how they were going about their activism. Yeah.
Are you still in touch with them?
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, they're so amazing. I mean, okay, so should we run through who they
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so Gia Bastida is she's from Mexico, and all of these kids were living in New York during this 2019 strike. They were going to school or had moved there or different reasons, but so they were all in New York. So Gia Bastida is Mexican native, and she is just a powerhouse. She just was like selected as Forbes 30 under 30, and then Rebecca Subnam is from Bangladesh, and she was living in New York. She experienced a flood in Bangladesh when she was just 5 years old, so she really had that very direct experience of what it looks like when you are in the countries that are hardest hit from climate change that you had no part in causing. Shiv Soin is the son of Indian immigrants who grew up in New Jersey, and he was really interested in politics. And then he started connecting the dots about like, oh, well, I read the IPCC report and we have till 2030 to like solve this problem and we're not doing it. And he started figuring out how to put policy issues combined with climate action. And then Jamie Margolin is a Colombian American from Seattle and just loves the Pacific Northwest and very rooted in the land. And she was inspired by things like the Women's March and was like trying to figure out how to do activism. And 3 of the 4 kids have all started nonprofits and continue to be really incredible activists. Yeah, Danica, do you want to add anything to that?
We're going to get to meet them in person for the first time
Yeah.
because we have our New York City or Brooklyn book release event. So we're going to,
My gosh.
I'll be in our
Actually, I'm just realizing what is the actual pub date of the book?
It already pubbed March 3rd.
March 3rd. Oh, okay. So it's the New York City or the Brooklyn launch.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Are you
Yeah,
guys
it'll be so much fun to
traveling
meet them.
and doing events all over?
I'm not traveling very much. This is the one event I'm traveling for, but I've done some in Kentucky and kind of locally here. And Mira's tackling the East Coast, the
Yeah.
Northeast.
Yeah. I've been doing Rhode Island and Massachusetts events. And then, yeah, we'll be in New York together. And then I'll be doing some events in Chicago and down in New Orleans later. And still some irons in the fire, hopefully some more.
So if people wanted to find out about any events that you're going to be at, is it going to be on your website?
Yes, it's on there.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
A better, Danica, I should always remember the name. Our website is called abetterworldthebook.org.
abetterworldthebook.org.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. We will make sure we have that link. So, okay, I wanted to talk to you about the whole question that I really wanted to hone in on in this conversation, which is that I just hear from a lot of artists, creators, writers that they feel very overwhelmed right now. And I think there's just not even just artists, but like people in general, because we have, the poly crisis with the economy and AI and war and then climate crisis all together. And how are you guys personally feeling right now? And do you have any thoughts on like how the making of this book maybe changed the way you think about that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Danica, you want to go first?
I am feeling overwhelmed for sure. It's a crazy time right now, and the climate crisis exacerbates all of these issues and is exacerbated by war and migration and all these things that we care about and inequality and everything. So, I think making this book actually really helped me feel like I was doing something. I think taking action and coming together with other people and building community is really the biggest way that I've found to feel okay and to feel grounded and, joining climate groups in my community. And Shiv Soin, one of the young adults in the book, said, you just need to show up. And So that's something I've been trying to keep in mind, even though sometimes the activism isn't exciting or whatever, you just keep showing up and you try to find people that you enjoy being around and working together with, like finding Meera, for example, was really helpful. There's this idea going around about pleasure activism, which, I think involves making art and creative. So, depending what your area of interest is. Like for Rebecca Sabnam, she got involved in climate work by making art, making these trash puppets with her school and being creative with protest. And, for other people, it would be making a graphic novel about it, or for people, it'd be making a film. Jamie Margolin is a filmmaker, so she's doing animated projects. You know, so there's finding what your niche, what you're interested in already, and applying that to climate activism, I think can be really super helpful. And I think that also just making time to rest and recharge, because burnout is a huge, especially when you're, trying to be an activist or get involved with things, it can be overwhelming. So for me, like I went for a hike yesterday, and, taking time to be with friends and to enjoy nature and to enjoy, whatever it is that brings you joy.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's you hit on all the key points. I mean, that part about community I think is really important. Like the event I did yesterday was this Mass Energize conference, and it was like 300 climate leaders from all across Massachusetts, and just learning about all these individual towns that have offices of sustainability and people doing the work on like all the levels, like from like we've got a house bill right now, call your representative, this is the stage it's at, here all like super wonky stuff, right down to like Tom Toro is there, who's doing amazing cartoons, single panel cartoons for the New Yorker that are addressing climate change. And so there's like no wrong way to be involved. Like you can just find out what you care about, and there's a place that you can plug in the things that you like to do and that you're skilled at and put them towards climate work. And in the process, you're going to connect with the other people that you are that also care about these issues and want to work towards something that's better. And there's just such like there's a feeling like we're like fighting against so much stuff right now. But like, I mean, the title of the book is like, we're also about like creating the world that we want to inhabit. It's not just a phrase. Like it really is like we are working towards things. And it's easy to forget that when there's so much to be fighting against,
Mhm.
but there is the necessity to hold on to the vision making of what that looks like. And we end the book with solutions and kind of a poster that is free and downloadable on the website that is like all of the ways that you can like step into this work and have fun and find community along the way and make the world that we want to like live in.
Mhm.
So despair is like not helpful. It doesn't feel good and it doesn't solve anything. So I just feel like doing something and doing it with people that you enjoy being around is really super important.
Yeah, yeah, and with that, you find, like, that things are happening, like, I just got so energized by going to this conference yesterday, it's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, everything is being completely dismantled on the federal level," but, like, locally, there's tremendous amounts of energy, and so, yeah, you can find those pockets and join them.
Wow. Yeah, that's everything that you say resonates with me so much because I'm kind of a conference junkie. I love going to in-person events and seeing people, and I'm always so struck by, wow, there's just amazing people in the world. I'm just, there's like stars coming out of my eyes. And then when, you read the news digitally, you're like, where my
Yeah.
experience of reality does not match what I'm reading about here. So I don't understand. Yeah, it's a very crazy time.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think and it's also I mean, it's disheartening that climate has been it feels like, the 2019, there's so much momentum and energy around it, and it feels like that's really been waylaid, but I mean, just as a science journalist covering this, like, this is the story of our lifetimes. Like, this
Mhm.
is underneath so many of these
Yeah.
other stories, taking over Venezuela, taking over Greenland, and invading places that have the oil and gas. Like, it's so intimately connected. And so, like, to remember that it's all one fight in many
Mhm.
ways. And so, like, recognizing that and not forgetting that and not feeling like, oh, well, I can't work on this because I need to fight fascism at this moment. Like, yes, and
Yeah. And Mira, do you live in Tennessee or?
No, I'm actually, I live on Cape Cod in Massachusetts is
Okay.
yeah, I
Oh,
teach down
you're associated with a Tennessee
yeah,
university?
I teach down at, Sewanee School of Letters. I teach creative nonfiction down there during the summers.
Okay, because I was thinking, like, Danica, you're in Kentucky, and Mira, I guess you have connection in Tennessee, and, I do live in an East Coast bubble because I live in New Jersey, and I work in publishing, and I feel like I don't have a good sense of what it's like in other parts of the country. So I don't know, what you feel in your daily life when you're I don't know, what can you say about that? Anything, or is this a dumb question? I'm not sure what the question I'm asking is, but, like, I guess is it different in other places in the country in your experience or no? Are we all kind of on the
Yeah, I mean,
same page?
as a journalist, I did, like, a whole series for Inside Climate News after the 2016 election that was really about, like, 9 stories from across the country about how conservatives were perceiving climate change. Because I was interviewing peach farmers whose harvest had failed because it was too warm, and dog sledders who couldn't depend on snow, and ranchers who were dealing with, like, a huge region-wide drought, and so it is tricky. We are very, very divided, and our information is divided, and we are kind of living in 2 spheres of reality at this point in this country. We're hoping this book gets into schools and does a little bridge building, that would be amazing, but, at the same time, like, even just I did an event in Rhode Island, and there's lots of pockets of Cape Cod and Rhode Island coast that's, like, fishermen, it's working class, pretty blue. One of those Inside Climate News stories I did was on Cape Cod. There's definitely a lot of Trump signs pop up here during elections, for sure, and I was just standing in line getting coffee after an event in Rhode Island, and the guy apologized to me for waiting because the line was taking a while, and then he I said, "Oh, it's my first time here. I don't know if this is unusual that, like, we're having to wait." And he's like, "Where are you from?" And I tell him, and he's like, "Oh, well, I'm a squidder. I squid." And I'm like, "Oh, you do that at night, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, but it's not very good right now because of climate change." And I'm like, "This is, like, the second thing out of your mouth?" And it was really fascinating to me that, he mentions ocean acidification, and then
Mm.
he's like, "I don't even know what that is, but I my captain says that's a problem." And I'm, like, thinking, "Wow,
Mhm.
people feel the changes that are happening, like, they're it's not a far away thing anymore, and so, I don't know, it would be interesting to go, like, travel cross country right now and feel that, but how are you feel in Kentucky, Danica, in terms of once the book is out?
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky on a political level is pretty depressing, and a lot of the regulations of pollution, like, water contamination, all the regulations are being scrapped by our politicians. So it's pretty depressing, but at the same time, like, I live in a neighborhood where I've recently met 3 different climate lawyers who are doing incredible work on a national level, and people are super committed activists here, and they're doing really great local work. And then, when you go out into, for example, Eastern Kentucky, where it's very red, and you talk to people, and they might not initially connect with the concept of climate change, but then when you say, how is the flooding affecting you? They've been so devastated by flooding. And when you kind of start to connect the dots, they're open to talking about it. And it's on a personal level, it's affecting people very deeply here. So, the conversations are a little tricky, but, when you connect with people directly, I think it does come through.
Well, I'm a big believer in the power of story, and then I think that story is a way to open up conversations. So, it seems to me that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and hopefully this book can, like, serve as a conversation starter, whether it's between parents with their kids or kids with their parents, maybe the younger people are more concerned and they're trying to get their parents on board, like, hopefully there's just something about the vivid visual creation, like what you did with the watercolors is just even when the information is tough or you're learning about wildfires or really horrific things, there's something I think about the brain taking in that this is, like if this was a documentary and you were seeing all these things, kids being separated from their parents on a boat or something just couldn't handle it. It would be overload. But this format, I think, allows you to take the stories in of these kids, which build over the course of the book and learn some things along the way that do help you connect the dots and figure out how to like move from paralysis or ignorance or, a desire to do something but not knowing how into something more tangible.
So maybe we could end with I know you're doing an event in Brooklyn together and you're meeting 3 of the kids who were profiled in the book, so that's super exciting. But like what is one other thing that you're really looking forward to or you're excited about related to the book coming up in the future?
Yeah, I'm super excited for this event. That's kind of what I'm focused on right now because Mira and I haven't been in the same room since we met at that book event where we first connected over this. So I'm very excited to see Mira in person and yeah, what's coming up?
Yeah, I'm super, super excited about Greenlight Bookstore on April 14th. Like that will just be just so great to get us all in the same room and compress the time space continuum into actual one reality in 3D. But later on that week, I'm actually going to be up in Anderson Bookstore up in Chicago is getting me to schools, which is like kind of that's a very new thing for me. So it'll be really fun to see what it's like talking to like 170 seventh graders and then going to high school and just talking with kids. I mean, I did an event yesterday that had like a high schooler, undergraduate and a graduate student who are all climate activists. And it was just, just being in a room with young people who are doing this and the reasons that they are finding like hope and ways to move forward and just making shit happen. Like that part is
Mhm.
it just is so exciting to see. Kind of like what you're saying, being in the conference junkie, just getting in a place and seeing what people are doing, so
Mhm. Oh,
yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah.
At my daughter's school coming up, and it's an elementary school, so it's younger kids. And even though this book is kind of geared towards high school age to maybe college age, it's one thing I'm really excited about this book is that I feel like it really spans. Like you can talk to younger children about this, and they have a perspective, and they have things that they know and can learn about climate change all the way up through adults. Like my mom, who's in her 70s, read the book and was like, I learned so much, even though she already knows she's a pretty committed climate activist herself. So I'm really looking forward to taking it to all different kinds of groups of people, from, first graders to, octogenarians.
Okay, well, this is awesome. I'm going to wrap it up here, but thank you so much, Mira. Thank you, Danica, for taking time to talk. And we'll be seeing your book in the bookstores and libraries.
Yay. Thank
Yay. Thanks so much for taking the time, Jen. It was really fun talking.
you. This was great.
All right, so I'm going to stop.